You're standing outside when the sky turns green. The wind picks up. Trees bend. The air pressure drops so fast your ears pop. You have maybe 4 minutes before the storm hits. You run inside, lock the door, pull the curtains, wait it out. But 40,000 years ago, there was no inside. No walls, no roof, no door to lock. Just you, your family, and a landscape about to be torn apart by forces you couldn't name or predict. So where did you go? This isn't a hypothetical. For 95% of human existence, storms were one of the most common ways to die. And the archaeological record shows that early humans didn't just survive them, they developed strategies so effective that some of the oldest known shelters on Earth weren't built for warmth or predator. They were built for weather. In 1965, a French archaeologist named Henry de Lumley was excavating a cave site in southern France called Terra Amata. The site dated to around 380,000 years ago, long before modern human, back when Homo heidelbergensis still walked Europe. Inside, he found something strange: rings of stones, oval patterns roughly 26 feet long and 13 feet wide. At the center of each ring, burn mark, charcoal, ash, and along the edges, post holes, small divots in the ground where wooden poles had been driven in and then removed. De Lumley realized he was looking at huts, not permanent shelters, not year-round home. These were temporary windbreaks built in a matter of hours using branches, animal skins, and stones to anchor the base, and they weren't random. Every single hut opening faced away from the prevailing wind direction southeast, toward the shelter of the cave's natural rock over. These people knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't hiding from the storm. They were positioning themselves against it. But here's the problem. Not every ancient human had access to a cave. In fact, most didn't. Caves are rare. They're usually occupied by bears, by hyenas, by other human groups who got there first. And even when you find one, it's often in the wrong place. Too far from water, too far from game, too exposed to different dangers. So what did humans do when they were caught in open country grasslands, river valleys, coastal plains with no rock shelter in sight? In 2015, a team of archaeologists led by Larry Barham from the University of Liverpool began excavating a site in Zambia called Kalambo Fall. The site sits near a 772-foot waterfall, one of the largest in Africa, and it's been continuously occupied for over 500,000. What they found there rewrote the timeline of human construction. Buried in waterlogged sediment preserved because oxygen couldn't reach it, they discovered wooden logs that had been deliberately shaped, notched, interlocked. The wood was dated using luminescence techniques to around 476,000 years ago. It was a platform, not a hut, not a windbreak. A raised wooden structure built above the floodplain, designed to keep people dry and off the ground during the region's violent seasonal storms. This was 200,000 years before Homo sapiens even existed, and it means that for nearly 500,000 years, humans understood something fundamental. You don't wait for the storm to hit. You see it coming, and you build. But building takes time, tools, cooperation, and storms don't always give you warning. In 2008, a paleoanthropologist named Curtis Marian led an expedition to a series of caves along the southern coast of South Africa, near a place called Pinnacle Point. The caves overlook the Indian Ocean. Today they're popular with tourists, but 164,000 years ago, they were occupied by some of the earliest anatomically modern humans, and Marian's team found evidence that these people weren't just using the caves as shelters. They were selecting them based on specific environmental criteria. The caves at Pinnacle Point face north. That matters because in the southern hemisphere, north-facing openings get the most sunlight and the least wind exposure during winter storm. The cave floors were littered with ochre, stone tools, and shellfish remains, but more importantly, the sediment layers showed something else. Burn mark, hearth, fire pits placed strategically near the cave mouth, not deep inside. Marian's team ran thermal models and discovered that fires positioned this way created a convection effect. Warm air rose and pulled fresh air in from outside, while smoke vented upward along the cave ceiling and out through cracks in the rock. These people had invented natural ventilation. They understood that you couldn't just hide anywhere. The shape of the shelter mattered. The orientation mattered. A cave that faced the wrong direction could fill with smoke, trap cold air, or funnel wind straight into your sleeping area. Survival wasn't about finding safety. It was about finding the right kind of safety. But even the right cave couldn't protect you from everything. In 1856, workers quarrying limestone in the Neander Valley of Germany unearthed a skeleton, thick bones, a heavy brow ridge. It was the first recognized Neanderthal fossil, and for decades, scientists assumed Neanderthals were primitive, brutish, incapable of the kind of planning modern humans used. Then, in 1979, researchers began re-examining a site in southwest France called Abri du Maras. The site is a rock shelter, not a deep cave, just an overhang, and buried in the sediment were layers of Neanderthal occupation dating back 90,000 years. What caught their attention wasn't the tools or the bones. It was the feathers. Thousands of them, mostly from large birds, eagles, vultures, crows, but they weren't food remains. The bones showed no cut marks, no signs of butchery. Instead, the feathers had been plucked, carefully removed from wings and tails. In 2020, a study published in Science Advances analyzed those feathers and concluded that Neanderthals were using them to make insulated cloaks. Not for warmth alone, for waterproofing. Birds' wing feathers overlap in a way that sheds rain. Neanderthals observed this, replicated it, took something they saw in nature, and turned it into wearable storm protection. They didn't just hide from the weather, they wore the solution. But wearing a feathered cloak only works if you're awake, if you see the storm coming, if you have time to prepare. What happened when storms hit at night? In 2019, a team of archaeologists excavating a site in Israel called Gesher Benot Yaakov, dated to 780,000 years ago, found something unexpected in the ash layer. Seeds, charred plant remains, but not from food, from bedding. The seeds came from species like saltbush and knotgrass plants that are fibrous, flexible, and naturally water-resistant. The arrangement of the seeds suggested they had been woven or piled into mats, then placed on the ground near hearth. These weren't just beds, they were insulation. The mats kept bodies off the cold, wet ground. They created a barrier between human skin and the mud that formed when rain seeped into the shelter. And when storms hit at night, that barrier could mean the difference between hypothermia and survival. But here's what's remarkable. The same plant species appear in bedding layers at sites across Africa, Europe, and Asia, separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of thousands of years. Which means this wasn't a random discovery. It was shared knowledge, passed down, taught, refined. A solution so effective that it spread across continents, carried by people who had no written language, no blueprints, no instruction manual, just observation, memory, and the absolute necessity of staying dry. But knowledge only helps if you can act on it, and some storms gave no warning at all. In 2004, researchers analyzing ice cores from Greenland identified a period around 12,800 years ago when temperatures across the northern hemisphere dropped by up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit in less than a decade. It's called the Younger Dryas, a climatic whiplash so violent it reversed the end of the Ice Age for over 1,000 years. The shift brought massive storm, flooding, unpredictable freezes, and it happened faster than a single human lifetime. You couldn't adapt by building better shelters because the storms kept changing. What worked one season failed the next. So humans did something else. They moved. Genetic studies published in 2016 by S.K. Villerslev at the University of Copenhagen traced mitochondrial DNA from human remains across Europe during this period. What they found was striking. Population centers didn't collapse. They relocated. Entire groups, dozens, sometimes hundreds of people abandoned river valleys that had been occupied for generations and migrated to coastal areas, mountainous regions, places with microclimates that buffered the worst of the storm. They didn't fight the weather. They followed the calm, and the groups that survived weren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. They were the ones willing to let go of familiar ground and trust that somewhere else, the sky might be quieter. By 10,000 years ago, the climate stabilized. Humans began to settle, build permanent farm, and for the first time in our species' history, we stopped moving when the storms came. We stayed. We reinforced. We invented roofs, walls, drainage systems technologies designed not to escape the weather, but to outlast it. But that shift came with a cost, because for nearly 300,000 years before that, survival didn't mean standing your ground. It meant knowing when to seek cover, when to build, when to wear protection, and when to walk away entirely. Today, when a storm warning flashes on your phone, you have about a dozen options. Go inside, drive somewhere safer, check the radar, wait it out. But the reflex, that tightness in your chest when the wind picks up, the urge to find shelter now that's older than language. It's the same calculation your ancestors made on open grasslands 400,000 years ago. Watching the sky darken, weighing their options with nothing but stone, wood, and each other. You inherited their solution. The preference for enclosed spaces during bad weather. The instinct to gather with others when danger feels close. The comfort of a roof. Even when logically you know the storm isn't severe, you're not overreacting, you're remembering. And somewhere in your DNA is the knowledge that the humans who survived weren't the ones who ignored the sky. They were the ones who respected it enough to hide.